Hey guys, it's the Conic, and in this one we're finally going to be going over the full build guide for my companion Spirit Walker, which is what I've been playing since League Start, as I really like where the build is currently at. The footage on your screen is what gameplay looks like for my current setup, which if I had to estimate would be between the medium budget and the high budget version that I'm going to show. So this is to say we have a lot of scaling potential left to go into the build if we so choose to. So in this video, we're basically going to be covering the different layers that make this build tick through the different budget levels, as well as how to level this setup going through the campaign. Every POB I'm going to cover in this video is going to be available in my build spreadsheet, which will be linked in the description. And I'm going to be adding information to the notes sections for the relevant POBs. So if you have any questions, remember to check out the notes section, because your question just might have already been answered there. So without further ado, we're going to start off with the high budget, and I feel like I should say this as a disclaimer. The reason I am not on the high budgets comfortably is because I decided to craft the amulet and I got giga diffed by RNG with spending what is probably like triple the cost regular people would craft it, and still not seeing the modifier I wanted. So keep that in mind, that with the specific amulet we want, you will have to craft it, and that involves chaos spamming, and that is just RNG. I should also mention that the amulet I just mentioned is a completely luxury item and is not actually needed to play the build. I still don't have it on in the gameplay footage you saw earlier. It is a luxury item. It's just very strong if you do get it. A lot of power behind that. Now, disclaimer out of the way, what exactly even is this build to begin with? Now, if you've been following the series, you already know, but this is the Spirit Walker. We are taming a boss, as well as using the Forgotten Warden chest piece as our sources for our two different companions. These companions are going to be where all our DPS is going to come out of. The companions in question are Mighty Silver Fist, which has a 25% base crit chance, which is really high, and the Wyvern, which is basically just the Forgotten Warden gives you a spirit vessel. This spirit vessel gets to use whatever shapeshift ability you socket into the skill, and we are socketing two Wyvern skills, so he's basically always going to be a Wyvern, which is why I will be calling him the Wyvern. We are also going to be using a third companion in the form of the bear, because the bear does not actually count towards the companion limit. Now, for ascendancy points, we are taking Wild Protector, which is the bear node I just talked about. It summons a bear spirit, which doesn't count towards your companion limit. This bear is a source of Intimidate, Maim, pretty good debuffs in the form of Intimidate. Also, the companion that's going to have our Loyalty gem, which is going to transfer 10% of damage to it. We're also going to be going the Katha's Balance node, which is companions gain added attack damage equal to 60% of our main hand weapon, and we're using a unique weapon to give our companions a very healthy amount of flat damage. Then we're taking Natural Order, which lets us tame bosses instead of just regular rares. This allows us to actually capture Mighty Silver Fist, or the map variant of him, which is Zekoa, which can actually have modifiers to him, making him even stronger. And then we have Idolatry, which basically wants us to stack as many idols in our gear as we can and try to avoid non-idol augments. We still use about 2-3 runes in this build despite this, but for the most part, we are going to be using mostly idols all through the build. Now, to talk a bit about the mechanics that make this build function, we're going to be using the tame boss piece to get Mighty Silver Fist. He has a base crit of 25%, and as such, when we start hunting for modifiers on tame beasts by giving unique monsters actual modifiers, we are going to be hunting for extra crits. Now, I currently do not even have extra crit on my monkey. The monkey you saw has extra chaos damage and extra cold damage, which is 40% damages extra of the respective damage type. But you really want extra crits because he really scales very hard with critical strikes. And if I had to choose between my 2 mod or just an extra crit monkey, I would go for the extra crit monkey because it is that big. So that is the first mechanic. Then our second companion, I go into the Wyvern's details in way more depth in a video I'll link in the description. But the TLDR is we need him to have power charges to fix his AI, and we're giving him set power charges by having him cast Devour to eat corpses. and we're then making these corpses available single target by running this sacrifice reservation skill, which allows our persistent skeletons to be considered as corpses for the purposes of our skills, which include the wyvern. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing, as it helps the channel out a lot. Now for our item section, we're just going to kind of breeze through this, going to give a quick note on the different items and like mod priorities and stuff like that. For our weapon, we're going to be using a Tyrannus grip, which is a unique spear that has been rune forged or upgraded by the rune forging bench twice, to give it a very, very big amount of physical damage or flat fizz. Make sure it is rune mastered. Rune mastered is the double upgraded one. You do not want any other name appended to the iron head. You don't want a base iron head either, because that would suck. Then we're pairing that with the shrine scepter. The reason we go for a shrine scepter is any socketed support gems into a purity of fire, ice, or lightning is going to be free. So we're using that to get some free life regen, minion damage, you name it. And then for the actual scepter, we're prioritizing plus levels and any combination of increased spirits, allies deal increased damage, and flat damage. Bonus points if you can get presence AoE or crit damage, but those are more luxury than anything else. Presence AoE especially can be very comfy because the wyvern tends to stay at the edge of your screen. So the bigger that presence AoE, the more uptime you're going to have for him when it comes to giving him rage, as well as other benefits of being in your presence. Then for every item on this setup except our body armor, we're going to be prioritizing evasion, because we are going to be a full evasion build with defensive layers of converting some damage taken to our companions. So the helmet is going to be full evasion. Our priority here is +2 levels, life, res, deflection. Those are priorities, and then after that you can start scaling as much evasion as you can. Then for sockets, we're going to be using the idol for minion reservation efficiency, which is the idol of Ralakesh. Now, if you're on the really high budget and you have, let's say, infinite budget, what you're going to be pairing the idol of Ralakesh with is going to be the Legacy of Starkonja's Head rune. Why we use this rune is because it is going to make it so you're converting 5% of damage taken from hits to your companion's life, which is just extra defenses, as well as giving you increased evasion when on low life. Because we are not consistently on low life, we're not going to rely on that, but that's just a nice extra for when you get chunked. But that's a very high budget option. I don't have that. It's by far not necessary, but that's going to be where I think we socket our third rune. If we eventually get to that point in scaling, then our other two runes are here, which is fizz damage, which is iron rune basically. And aside iron rune, we actually use a different modifier here. That is the warding rune of armature. This rune we're using our main hand weapon. It makes it so our main hand weapons, we get 15% of the weapon's maximum damage as rune, and it allows us to use refutation as a skill without actually losing too much evasion from our gear. So keep that in mind. Instead of 40% here, we have actually it is here. Gain max runic ward equal to 50% of weapon's maximum damage. It's going to be one iron rune on one of these, and then if you have a third socket because you corrupted an exceptional item, you then go for the second iron rune. Then for body armor, we're going to be using a Forgotten Warden. This is the chest piece that provides us with the wyvern. It is very, very important to the setup. It basically allows us to fully rely on the wyvern for wave clear and rely on silver fist for single target, even though I will be honest, the wyvern has a ton of single target damage, so it's not even entirely true, but we're going to go with that. The wyvern is very good for clear and as well as single target. We're also going to, this is also the reason why we prioritize deflection as much as we can, because whenever we deflect the hit, we reduce its damage by 8%. I think according to this POB, we reduced it by 39%, and then on top of reducing it by 39%, we transfer 15% extra to the minion via the chest piece. So it makes deflection very, very important. And it also makes it so we get extra deflection when the little energy shield that it provides is empty, which is just a nice bonus to have as well. Then for our gloves, we're going to be using a life pair of gloves with triple resistances, elemental resistances to be specific. We want fire, lightning, or cold res. The higher the tier, the better, because we are then going to be using a void flux, which is a new currency that transforms all fire, lightning, and cold modifiers on an item to chaos res. This gives us 3 different instances of chaos res on our gloves and allows us to get numbers as high as like 65% chaos res, probably even higher, by converting all those tiers of fire res into chaos res. This is the easiest it's ever been to cap chaos res in this game, and it basically makes it so once you have your gloves ready, you just need one more item with chaos res, literally in this case with 10% chaos res elsewhere, and you cap your chaos res. It's never been easier. As well as the sockets here, we're going to be using, if we have 2 sockets, we're going to be using gain 1 rage on melee hits on the socket. If we don't have this, we're going to actually have to put rage on our spear foot, but we'll talk about that when we get to the skill section. The actual high budget option we want here is the Carved Majesty. The Carved Majesty is an idol which can go on gloves. It gives companions onslaught for 4 seconds when they hit your marked target, and we do use marks in this setup, so that is just basically free single target onslaught, and that's very, very strong. And it's an idol as well, so it also gives us an extra buff with idolatry ascendancy node. Then Drake skin, we are going to be going for movement, speed, life, and then resistances with deflection again, and then past that you want evasion. So the priority is life, movement, speed, res / deflection, and you know, in that order. And then for sockets, we're literally just putting in an idol here just to get idolatry buff. So we don't care about endurance charges, but it's a free, it's an idol, so idolatry becomes stronger. Then amulet, this is the crafted amulet. I'm going to leave the crafting instructions in a note of this POB. So it's very straightforward, but it can be very expensive. Like I said, I spent like 150, like 170 actually divine trying to get this amulet, and I still didn't get the modifiers I needed. It's up to you if you actually go for it. It's a luxury item, it's not needed. You can have a lot of fun and play the build entirely without touching this. I never got it, but if you want to min max, this is an amulet you definitely want to get, and it's going to be anointed with gigantic hollow to make our minions have 20% more damage at the cost of reservation efficiency. And then for rings, your priority is life, attributes, res, whatever you need, and then flat evasion as the last point. We don't need any of the flat damage anywhere. We just need life, res, attributes, evasion, you know, as you need. And then for the belts, our priority is life and res, period. Now we, in the high budget, again, to min max, you're going to want to get a +2 level of all minion skills belt, but it is by no means mandatory, and it's a luxury item to have. So if you do not have the currency for it, then just skip it and get extra resistances or something. That is what I'm currently doing as well. So luxury item, if you want to spend on it, go for it. So it has a lot of power behind it. Then for the jewel section, we have it from nothing, which uses wild surge incantation. This allows us to get some damage reduction by transferring some to mana. We barely spend mana in this setup, so this is just very nice to have. Revive is very, very important, because with revive, sacrifice makes it so minions take longer to revive. This helps us bring it back so we can actually have our skeletons up a bit more, so that our wyvern can then eat them and use its abilities, single target at least. Then we give our minions res. This caps our companions res, and as well as giving them an extra 5 max. And then we get a little bit of presence AoE here. Again, quality of life for the wyvern to try to keep it in our presence, and then some attack speed here. That kind of covers everything else. We are using a megalomaniac as well. I don't have one in game. You don't have to have this. This is something you get if you can find one with good prices that has good, like at least 2 good modifiers you want. I just put 3 different modifiers here that you might want to look for. You do not want this combination necessarily. There's many modifiers on the tree that you could choose to get on your setup. For example, there's Vow Mending, which gives minion regen, chaos res, and life. There's Entropic Incarnation, there's Grip of Evil, there's Necrotic Touch. Well, this wouldn't help the monkey, but it would help the wyvern. There is Relentless Fallen, Right Hand of Darkness, Left Hand of Darkness, Lord of Horrors. There's even one over here called Soul Meridian. There's Bringer of Order, you name it. Growing Swarm for AoE is really nice. CDR is also good for the monkey as well. You could get Profane Commander, Enveloping Presence. Again, there's a lot of modifiers that are very good. You could even decide to opt for stuff like subterfuge and go find an ES helmet. You can go for evasion specific notables. You can even do the train deflection. Just get any set of modifiers that actually work for the build and you would want if you do go for the megalomaniac route. But if you are only getting one modifier, it might not be worth it compared to like a 3 mod emerald. Not because the damage won't be more, it might be more, but the emerald has damage and defense, especially when it comes to QOL, like reduce low potency of debuffs. That is very nice to have. And increased evasion is also nice. Companion damage is, you know, nice. But those are also the modifiers we're looking for on the emerald. We're basically going to be using, this is our ward protector, which is the bear we get from ascendancy. Romira's recruiter is basically loyalty, but has some extra recoup components to damage transfer to the bear specifically. Feeding frenzy for extra damage, muster, rapid attacks, and swing. Basically just scaling its damage as much as we can. Purity of Fire is going to have a lot of support gems that boost it and are going to be free without reservation. So Vitality 2, Upwelling 2, Herbalism 2, Cool-Headed. All of these are pretty good support gems for auras, and with no reservation cost, it's very, very high value. And then Spirit Vessel, we're going to be using Oil Barrage as our main DPS for the Spirit Vessel. Devour, so it can get power charges to then use Oil Barrage. Then pairing that with Muster, Ricochet 2, and Fork. Ricochet 2 and Fork make it so whenever their projectile from Aura Barrage hits terrain, it has a 50% chance to chain to an enemy. And when it chains to an enemy and it hits an enemy, it's going to fork, thereby giving 2 projectiles instead of 1. Refutation is very nice defenses, but now they've made it so the cooldown doesn't actually start ticking until the duration expires. With that change, now we want to scale the same way, but we're only going to use refutation if we think our life is under threat rather than just up permanently. Now for refutation as well, I would not advise you really using this until your ward is somewhere in the 100 to 150 ranges, maybe even slightly higher if you really do not like being stunned. I find if you are sub 100, you will get stunned very frequently using refutation, and it might not be worth it at that point. But once you cross the 100 mark, it tends to get very comfortable, and 150 is very, very comfortable. That being said, quality is very important for refutation, so do not underestimate the quality. It basically reduces that 50% less threshold to 30% less. Very, very important. Spearfield is going to be very important. This is going to be what we spam the vast majority of the time, and the reason being is it's going to be our melee attack. It's going to hit enemies. We're going to use this paired with the glove idol to generate rage, and on generating rage, we're going to be making our minions regenerate rage every second, those in our presence at least, via the Warlord Berserker node. So if you do not have the space for gain rage on melee hit because you went for Carved Majesty and you only have 1 socket, then what you're going to do instead is you're going to replace Rearm with Rage 3 support, and you're just going to play the exact same way. But this basically makes it so we can generate rage for our minions. We're going to be applying blind, so our evasion and deflection is a lot stronger. This, I think, POB is without blinded. With blind, which is very, very easy to apply. We have 74% deflect and yada yada. And these numbers you see here also do not include the chest piece. So this high budget POB is really, really high budget with the items, but gets defenses to match. So just keep that in mind. Skeletal Cleric, last gasp to keep it alive. Brutus's Brain, so it doesn't take damage and meat shield. You don't really need Brutus's Brain. I don't actually have it, but it's a nice add-on to have. Sacrifice to make it so our minions are corpses. Sniper's Mark is very important. This is going to be our source of armor shred because we're going to be using Mark for Death, which makes it so 8% of physical damage dealt to the enemy breaks their armor. Siphoning Mark makes it so we leech from damage done to them. It's nice extra defenses, but like you barely notice it. Charge Mark makes it so they drop shock ground when the monkey triggers it with its crits. And the Internal Mark makes it so it has to be consumed twice, so it's still on them even after the first consumption, which makes it so Mark for Death is up longer to then shred that armor to increase our damage even further. Wind Dancer for the more evasion rating per stage. Very, very nice. We have rage on it, so if an enemy hits us, we don't necessarily have to then use Spearfield for the next like 4 seconds. Blind to make it harder for them to hit us again if they do hit us. and then area for just AoE. Zekoa, which is going to be, I should move him up honestly, but Zekoa is going to be our main single target DPS. He's going to be using rapid attacks 2 for attack speed, muster for more damage, feeding frenzy. And if you're in the very high budget, and again, these are very luxury items and by no means necessary, we have Diala's Desire for +1 quality, +5% quality and +1 level, as well as reduced reservation. And then Uneto's Embrace. If you do not have them, you can replace them with stuff like Heavy Swing, Minion Mastery. If you do not have Gigantification, you could look at Hawking Minion Support Gem. The list goes on. There's many different options for before you get these support gems, so do not think they are mandatory by any means. And then we have Skeletal Snipers, Reavers. These are just here for all the monster scaling we have across the board, and that about covers everything, to be honest. So very briefly, we're also going to be talking about the other POBs and just how to use them and whatnot. Now for the mid-budget POB, this one is going to be basically the same items, but to a worse degree. You have less evasion coming from items here. You have less like lower tier modifiers. You're not expected to have any of the high ticket items, like I said, were luxury. The skill gems are also filled up with items that are not luxury. So we do not have any lineage support gems here that you shouldn't have. Loyalty is here. Basically, this is a very, very low budget setup, I would say. Even though it's called mid budget, realistically, you would spend, you can probably spend in the current economy, I would say like 20 divines getting here, which isn't low budget, but it's also nowhere near like high budget either, which is why I am using this as a mid budget POB. As for the tree, it's set to a level 86 character, so this is going to be the tree you have, and then once you get more points and you need to spend more, you can look at the high budget tree for that information. And then for the leveling POB, this one is going to be important to know because we're going to be leveling as twisters. I do not currently have the notes section, but I will put information on when to swap and all of that in here. But the TLDR is we're going to be using twisters to level from 1 to like about 27, 28, Act 2. When we get to the Mastodon Badlands and we've gotten our first ascendancy, then we can swap. We are going to be swapping to companions at that point. So we're going to be using the companion swap tree as well as the companion swap setup here. This is going to be using a Judge Osiodon, which can be found in Bone Pits in the Mastodon Badlands area, as well as a Bramble Hawk, which can be found in Act 1 Hunting Grounds. Those are going to be our two companions. They're going to be paired with basically the same support gems because we don't have access to much in the way of support gems. And then Wild Protector is going to be what we take for our first ascendancy, which is the bear. And he's going to have the same support gems essentially. And they're going to be pairing all these with a Lost Man Subjugator. This is going to be a Spectre that's going to enrage the Judge Osiodon, making it do more damage, have an AoE attack, basically making it a clear powerhouse, which is very, very nice. The thing is, to get all these minions in the same setup, you're going to need a scepter that has a minimum of 28% increased spirit. And again, this number will be in the note once I actually write it. You want to have a scepter that has at least 128% spirit, or 128 spirit, or 28% increased spirit. And then this is just how you're going to keep changing the trees so you see how to progress. Make sure it's on the bottom left. So that basically covers the skill section. We have up to Act 3 Monkey because once you switch your Silverfist, all you're going to do from this point on is upgrade your support gems from like Rapid Attacks 1 to 2, Feeding Frenzy 1 to 2, but not much changes between then and endgame when you get to then swap to the medium budget version essentially. That is a lot of information to digest, I know, but that is basically everything I have to say about the build. It's treated me very well. I've had a very pleasant experience. It's basically trivialized the game on budgets that are very new to me. I have never trivialized the game this early on to where I could spend like 150 divines on an amulet when I realistically only spent like 50 on my build and not felt the need to really upgrade other facets because I'm having that good of a time. I do not need upgrades if I don't die or if I have no issues killing stuff. So it's been a very, very pleasant experience for me, and I hope it's a pleasant experience for you. If you have any questions, leave them in the comment section below as I'll be answering everything as usual. If you haven't already, do consider liking and subscribing as it helps the channel out tremendously. And with all that said, thank you for watching.